Early retirement is one of those goals that a lot of people have set for themselves to try to achieve at some point in life. But in today's video, what I really want to do is to shed light as someone that kind of semi-retired early about the dark sides of early retirement and why it's not something that you should necessarily always achieve, depending, or at least try to achieve, depending on your current situation. Now, a little bit about me to kind of maybe understand the angle of where I come from is that I was someone that technically never officially retired early. You know, I'm working right now, you know, as the time that I'm making this video and talking, but there was a phase of my life for the better part of over 1 year where I was essentially unemployed, and not by choice, because my industry was essentially shut down for a year during the pandemic. And even once, so I work in the TV and film industry, and if you don't know the background story to what happened to my industry is that for over 1 year my industry was shut down during the pandemic. And even once things got back to normal, somewhat back to normal, it was a massive gradual recovery. So it wasn't like one day everyone went outside and started to work again. It was a very gradual recovery where we had to take on projects little by little. And then what happened is several years later, enter 2023, the strikes happened. If you don't know about the background story, feel free to Google up writer's strike or SAG-AFTRA strike, SAG-AFTRA strike, and you will see so many articles. But the bottom line is that my industry was shut down for essentially around 2 years over that period. And so because of that reason, not because of choice, I didn't even really have the option to look for a new job. I did try to look for a new job anyway in a different industry, but at the very end of the day, there's only so much you can do, because if all of your background experience is in one industry, changing your industry, you know, is not very easy, especially if you're only trying to do it temporarily because your industry, your main industry is shut down. But the idea is that I basically, you can say at the very least, I was on a sabbatical for basically almost 2 years during that time period where I wasn't working. So you can kind of say I was basically retired at that point from my particular job, even if it was just a temporary retirement. And so in today's video, what I really want to talk about, now that you know my background, is my experience and about what it was like and about the dark side to early retirement. So with that said, let's get started. Like, comment, subscribe, and let's get started. So the first problem with early retirement and why you should maybe consider that it may not necessarily be the best option is that while it is true that in early retirement there are so many great things about it, you know, you can finally travel the world, you can work on your hobbies. Just imagine that dream, right? You can travel the world, you can work on your hobbies, you can work on your social life, you can spend time going outside, partying, doing whatever you want. At the very end of the day, the problem is that for a lot of people that retire early, you lose your sense of routine. This is especially true if you never really developed a healthy lifestyle to begin with while you were working, which the reality is that many people, in order to achieve early retirement, this obviously depends on the person, but I'm just saying generally, right? A lot of times for people to achieve early retirement, they have to be a little bit of a workaholic. They have to work very hard because it's not easy to achieve early retirement, right? And so in the process of trying to achieve early retirement, what often ends up happening is that a lot of times people start to have to neglect other areas of their life while they were in the process of building to early retirement. They may not have spent a lot of time working on themselves in other areas outside of work. They may not necessarily know themselves. They may have to go through a phase of just self-discovery, and they just don't know a lot of things. So the problem is that while it is true that, you know, you can travel the world, just imagine that, right? You can travel the world, do whatever you want, you can, you know, spend time party all day and all that kind of stuff. It comes to a point that it's going to get relatively repetitive. And if you don't know yourself, especially what actually at the core makes you feel fulfilled, what really ends up happening is it can actually be pretty boring sometimes, you know? The reality is that there are some people I know that early retire, but what happens is that now they're sitting at home watching television all day. And television, while it's very awesome, it comes to a point things get relatively repetitive, and people need to do a certain something to try to find fulfillment in their lives. They don't need to. but I think it's what most people will want to. And that's one of the big problems I think that really happens when you retire early. Now, a very, very big advice, and I know someone that gave me, and that's going to be a good transition and segue into the next point we're going to talk about, is really about the fact that I think one of the biggest advice that I really, really got from someone that retired early, I don't even think it was a famous person. I think it was just someone that maybe we were drunk at a bar and he kind of just passed on that information to me. But the idea is that if you are going to try to achieve early retirement, it's very, very important that you treat early retirement as an accomplishment, that it's something not to get away from something, but rather to leave that something to go towards something else. Because some people will retire early, but the problem is that once they retire early, if they even retire early, they're going to achieve that goal, but not know where to go next. Right? Some people are just trying to retire early because they don't like their jobs and they want to get away from it. But then the problem is that once they get away from it, they don't know what the next step is. So the goal of early retirement should not necessarily be to get away from something, but to get away from something in order to create a pathway to something else that's even better. That would be the right mentality to have if you're trying to retire early someday. Because otherwise, it can be relatively boring sometimes to retire early if you don't know what to do with your time, right? And I think that's something very, very fair to say. Now, the next point about early retirement, why I say you should not necessarily always retire early, you have to think about if you're trying to achieve early retirement, is that sometimes retiring early can also be a little bit socially isolating. Because the reason why is that the reality is that most people cannot retire early. That's just the nature of life. So if you are someone that achieved early retirement, but you're trying to now have fun with your life, the problem is that most people during 9 to 5, while you have the freedom to be able to enjoy life from 9 to 5, most other people are working 9 to 5. Your peers, your family members, even if you have children, right? Your children are probably going to school if you include after school from 9 to 5. So when everyone else is kind of busy doing their own thing, you're basically stuck at home or basically isolated to yourself, not really interacting with a lot of people. Yes, you can make friends that early retire as well and you can kind of meet them, but at the end of the day, there's just a lot fewer of them. There's a lot more people outside in the workforce that are actively working, fulfilling and trying to pursue their goals, while you're just basically sitting retired and not doing too much, and maybe just spending your time watching television or even just the wall all day. When your favorite season of a TV show has finally wrapped up, you're basically just looking at walls all day. And that's just something that to really, really think about and consider. And then probably the last point, maybe we'll squeeze something in at the end, but potentially the last point that I really want to talk about is really about personal fulfillment. And it's really about the idea that a lot of times in order to achieve early retirement, you have to actually work a job that pays a lot of money. And the reality is that many people do not like their jobs. This is obviously just a fact, actually, of anything, that, it's well known through surveys that many people do not like their jobs, or at the very, very least, they're working a job that maybe they do like it, but it still leaves more to be desired, right? They want a little bit more from their jobs. So otherwise, why would they retire early? Doesn't that make sense? Because if you like your job, then why retire? So the idea really behind this point is that because if you are someone that is trying to look to retire early, it probably means that you don't find your job particularly enjoyable. In many cases, I know it's a little bit of an assumption, but in many cases, I found this to be relatively a common trend. And if you are working a job that you don't necessarily enjoy, it might be time to reconsider your current life decisions and your current life career path, because maybe it's time to switch your job to something you do employ or that you do enjoy. The idea really behind this point is that if you are someone that truly loves what you do, if you are someone that truly enjoys your job, you probably should not want to retire. And if you do want to retire, then it probably means you are trying to get away from something. And that goes back to the point that I was making earlier, how you should treat early retirement not as something to get away from something, but as rather something to move towards something else. So if you have goals in mind for what you want to do when you retire early, that is the right mindset to be able to have. So the purpose of this video is not to say that you should not retire early per se, but it's to really understand that if you are going to retire early, to understand the dark side of early retirement and about what you might potentially be signing yourself up for if you do end up even being able to achieve early retirement. So the bottom line is to recap, it's really just about the fulfillment side, the lifestyle, the work-life balance. Not the work-life balance. I talk so much about work-life balance in other videos. That's why. But the lifestyle, the social isolation, and the fulfillment, and then just the mentality and the mindset you have to retire early, to really think about and consider. With that being said, that's really what I wanted to cover in today's video. So if you guys enjoyed that, leave a comment, feel free to share any stories, experiences, subscribe, hit the bell, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.